There's some common reasons we get calls from churches week after week. We're going to unpack 3 of those today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, we get phone calls from people who are looking for help. They've got some challenge in their church. And what's fascinating to me is, every church is unique, for sure. But the problems that they have, the pain points that cause them to ask for help, are pretty common. And so what we've identified for today's episode are the 3, I think, most common reasons why a church says, listen, we need someone to help us walk through this issue. So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, right. And there's some variations within these. These are kind of some general categories, and there's always lots of details. Every church, though very, very common, lots of things. There's a million things that churches have in common, but of course, every church is also unique and has their own flavor going on. So, but yeah, I think these are some good general things. I'm surprised we don't need like counseling or something, right? Like we take on, all we get are calls about problems. No one ever calls us and they're like, hey guys, just want to tell you how good things are going over here.
Yeah.
Like we need the happy-go-lucky hotline where pastors call in and they're like, just calling to give you a little celebration point, guys.
Things are great. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we're gluttons for punishment. Because you're saying that and I'm like, I don't know. It's maybe what I mean, people get into medicine, right? Because they like helping people get better. There's not a hotline there's not a hotline for doctors who are like, I just want people to call me just to say, I'm feeling really great today. I had my apple a day and I'm keeping you away. Like that's
that's what morning radio is for, I guess. If anyone listens to FM radio anymore, I haven't in years, but those are the people calling in. They're like, hey, love you guys.
Yeah, there you go. That's true. Yeah, I don't think doctors are depressed that sick people are calling in.
There's sick people. Yeah.
And you know what? I do think this is a side tangent. Sorry, but I do think that we sometimes get calls from pastors and they're almost like, I'm having this problem. They're maybe embarrassed to say it, or they really feel like they're the first person who's ever dealt with this. And, we're not offended by your problems. We don't think it's a reflection on you as a person or as a leader necessarily, or any of that. And we're glad to help. Like that's our ministry. Our ministry is to help.
Honestly, we do thrive on that. We do this because we thrive on it. Everything is different. Everyone's a challenge. It's like, okay, I want to help bring some clarity to this situation. I know we get filled up and charged by that.
Totally. Yeah. And never am I feeling like, wow, these folks are just really messed up. Like that's not how you feel. I mean, you see some pretty difficult situations, I guess, but I'm never turned off by that. I'm always like, wow, yeah, let's get in there. Like, let's get into the middle of that. And
we just spent some time this morning talking about a church and it wasn't like, because they've got some challenges, but we're like, it's a challenge to us. So like, what kind of great solution can we help them work through that's going to be cool and outside the box? So I guess while we're kind of on this line of discussion, call us sooner than later. If you're thinking, I don't know, I don't want to air out my laundry, don't wait. Call us early. The earlier you call us, the better and faster things will work out for the best.
Yeah, right. Not that we're like the saviors or anything, but call someone. It's okay to need help or to ask for help. Like, that's all right. For us, we don't see it's ministry. So we don't see this as you're calling some outsider. We're inside. We're all in the body of Christ. So when you call the Malphurs group or you call some other group, who I hope has a similar heart to ours, you're not calling an outsider. You're calling your brother.
That's a great point.
So,
yeah.
Don't think of it that way.
We're on the same team. Well, but so many teams think about, pastors maybe not quite as much, maybe some, the ones that don't call, we don't know what they're thinking, maybe that's it. But definitely other like elders or other leaders in the church, I think they think that they've got to get past this idea of calling an outsider when in fact we're not. We shouldn't be considering anybody an outsider in the body. So great thought, Scott. Nice.
Okay. Yeah. So let's hop into the three most common reasons why we get a phone call when we get them.
Yeah. So number one is a declining church. So that it's, far away number one. Now, the reason for decline is there's a million different reasons why a church is declining, but this becomes the visible, felt pain in the church at some point. They're like, somebody finally, honestly says we aren't what we used to be. And so, this is definitely the number one why people call, because it becomes the most obvious or the most felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, church decline is interesting. Churches, generally speaking, don't decline quickly. There's exceptions to that. There can be major blow-ups or church splits that cause a church to decline really quickly. That's not the normative thing. Yeah. The normative thing is for churches to decline over a period of a few or even several years. And I like to use the analogy of flying on an airplane. Most of the descent that you do in an airplane, you aren't even aware of. Have you ever sat on the airplane? They go, "We're beginning our initial descent into such and such place," and then you're flying for another 20 minutes before you actually have that sensation of we're about to land. You know what I'm talking about, AJ?
Yeah.
And you don't even feel it. You don't feel the sense that this plane is starting to make its way down. And in landing a plane, that's a good thing. You don't want it to be like, and so, but you do have.
We're starting our dive.
Right, we're starting our dive into Charlotte International Airport. Yeah. What good leaders have though is, and what a pilot has is a dashboard that indicates to them that we are decreasing in altitude. The problem is that in most churches, they're not feeling it, and they're not seeing it until it gets to the point where it's unavoidable and impossible not to notice. And that's the real challenge, is that now they're calling and asking for help because, oh my goodness, we've lost 50% of our folks in the last 5 years. It would have been a lot easier to right the ship on year 2 versus year 5. But it gets to the point where it's unavoidable. You cannot mistake the fact that it's just happened. And now you're asking for help. Yeah, right. So I think that's far and away the number one cause. If you're looking around going, well, that's not us, I would encourage you, make sure you have a good dashboard in front of you so you know if it's happening. Right. And catch it early, not late.
Yeah. And so episode plug, last week we talked about having a dashboard. So
good one.
Go back last week, grab episode 153 at malphursgroup.com/153 and read about a dashboard. So you know what, whenever we're beginning our descent, you and I fly a lot. I'm a ear popper, hold my nose and pop the pressure out of my ears. Yeah. And that usually do that like maybe 3 times or so on the descent. So may not feel it, but at some point I'm like, oh, I feel this in my ears, and I'll, blow my ears out. But I do that sometimes just instinctively. I don't, and that, so that could happen with a pastor. Your church, it's declining, and you might be reacting to that with an instinctual thing and not really giving it a lot of thought as to what's really happening around me. That could be, we've we have fewer Sunday school classes than we used to, or we've gone from 2 services to 1. You might be doing these things and you're kind of like, hey, we need to make a change, but you're not stopping to think, what's happening that has precipitated this change? Why did I just have to blow my ears out? Well, because we're descending. So that dashboard will help be an indicator for that.
I think you and I need to, at some point, not on the podcast, need to have a discussion about whether or not that's healthy to be doing. I mean, is that good for your ears to be doing that?
Why would it not be?
I don't know. I never do that. One, it hurts. And 2, could you like burst an eardrum doing that or something? Ugh, I don't know.
I don't think so.
We do not need to spend time
if
on
you're
the
a
podcast
doctor,
talking about yes, if you're a medical doctor, let us know on the YouTube
ear, nose,
comment.
throat guy. We might want to know you anyway. We would be friends.
You might need to stop doing that.
I think so. No, it's the one issue. So this is probably, I'm not helping my case, is sometimes like one of my tear ducts, the pressure, I can like blow out a tear duct instead of my ear.
Okay, I expect a flood of comments rebuking in the name of the Lord AJ for popping his ears on an airplane.
Why are you gonna let your ears, become painful or something?
My ears are fine.
Well, great. Let's see. Drop us a note or a comment about whether you manually pop your ears when you're flying.
Yeah, I never do that. Okay. All right, let's move on to the second reason.
So number 2 is very common and has become more common definitely in the last 5 years, that I would say, in our ministry.
This is more pastor so changes
in the church. Yeah. So we get a lot of calls either from a church who is anticipating a pastor change or is beginning to initiate that. Like, that's just, it's been made known, hey, this guy's going to be retiring or leaving, or a pastor has already left and they may be in a search process or about to begin a search process. This has become much more common. And it's a really interesting situation. And I don't know if it's been as surprising to you, Scott, as it has to me, but working with a church in through this situation has, like, almost always, okay, I'm just going to say always, been super beneficial for us to work with a church in a pastor change situation. I think that's really interesting. So if you are one of those folks that's thinking of, maybe that's going to be you, or maybe it is you already, wow, we have amazing results working with churches that are going through pastor changes in, kind of like a reset process, and whether you want to consider revitalization or not, but resetting the structure and mission and vision is awesome to do during or before a pastor change.
Yeah. I mean, we get asked from time to time, hey, we're about to have a pastoral transition. Should we go through a strategic planning process before or after we have a new pastor come on? And we always recommend before. And the reason for that is you're going to end up making usually a much better hire, because then you're hiring someone who is in alignment with where the church is going, rather than hiring someone who you expect to then bring in a vision. You tell us where we're going. No, the church has a direction, and then you want to hire someone who is in alignment with what that direction is. That doesn't mean that your new pastor won't take what you've come up with and make some adjustments. Adjustments are good. You should be making adjustments on certain things anyway, so that's okay. He's still going to have the ability to influence the direction of the church in certain ways, but you want the overall direction and vision of the church to be owned by the church, not be the pastor's vision, not just be, what he wants to get done, his agenda. You really want to bring someone on who is in alignment with the church's God-given vision. And so it's much, much better if you can do it before, either right before your existing person retires or is stepping away, or in that interim process. With the Malphurs group, like with the strategic envisioning process, you're not talking about taking months and months and months and years to develop this. You get through the majority of the planning aspect of it within 3 months or so. So if you can delay your search by 3 months, you can get through the planning phase of the strategic envisioning process, and then you can be working on implementation while you're working on your search process.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to our friends over at the Shepherd staff. If you're maybe considering a staffing agency to help with your next leadership transition, gosh, our friends at the Shepherd staff are awesome to work with. So give them a shout. What's their website, Scott? Do you know it off the top of your head? Probably something around the name of the Shepherd staff.
It's the shepherdstaff.com. So the, and then shepherds, SHEPHERDS, and then staff, STAFF. So you got two S's right next to each other. You don't want to mess that one up.
Okay, so number 1, church decline. Number 2, pastor change. Number 3, we're talking about leadership conflicts, and there's a lot of variation in there. And even the others, pastor change might be a conflict issue. Church decline might be a leadership issue. Usually is. There's more to the story than just random decline. But conflict in leadership is a significant standout as well. And we're going to kind of pull out at least 3 components, kind of common subtopics of leadership conflict here in this point, Scott.
Yeah, so I think that for me, the most common one that I can think of is some sort of like mistrust or just like a low trust environment within the church in some regard. So the staff has low trust with maybe a board or a council. The congregation has mistrust with a board or a council or with the pastor. So any sort of individual leadership having mistrust with some other sort of entity or constituency within the church. It is then when one party or the other, sometimes both, but it's usually prompted by one party or the other, will say, we should get someone in here to help us work through this issue. And then the other side often will begrudgingly go, okay, fine, we'll get someone else in here to help us work through it. So that's common. Again, as you mentioned, there's usually other issues involved, and then it's just sort of manifesting as conflict. There's usually something underlying that's driving that we have to get to the heart of. But I would say, in my experience, there's usually a trust issue between groups in the church. And so when it comes to leadership conflicts, it's often that. But there are a couple other ones.
Yeah, right. And a lot of times, I mean, even the other 2 points that we'll talk about under this number 3 point, they're sometimes all intertangled together. It's rarely just one clean issue. And the challenge about leadership conflicts as well is that these go on usually way too long before people are honest about that there is an issue, and then finally wanting to seek a little bit of outside help. Again, we're using a term that we're telling people not to use, but disinterested help, I suppose. Someone without a dog in the hunt, as they would say in the southern states. But it goes on too long, these mistrust issues. And you're right, Scott, it could be between any number of parties with one another. So yep, mistrust is an issue. We have to have transparency in leadership. Okay, I'm going to just use this as a segue. Shared vision as well. So this is another one of our sub points here on church leadership conflict. It sometimes just comes down to a lack of shared vision, or vision even ever being discussed amongst varying groups of people, or some kind of a larger group of people. And so sometimes this is not at all malicious or sinful, certainly, or nobody's trying to do anything to hurt anyone else. In the lack of vision, in the vacuum of vision in the church, everyone operates under their own kind of personal view of the future. And it's usually not even discussed, and only until maybe something happens, some kind of catalyst. Maybe this is launching a new ministry, or considering a move, or a name change, or a building project, or something, that people are like, well, wait a minute, why would we do that? And that's when people start maybe, having tension with one another, and you can't answer the question, why would we do that, without a vision discussion? So all these things end up getting wrapped up in one another. And then sometimes if maybe it gets pushed through, then now we've coming back to point number one on leadership mistrust and other forms of leadership conflict. But vision difference, yeah, it's another one of these subpoints of leadership conflict that it's there in a lot of churches.
Yeah, and then we've danced around the edges of the other subpoint with leadership conflict is just polity problems. Like, it's not clear who has authority, and that's power. We like to think as Christians that power doesn't exist. There aren't power struggles, but power is a thing that always exists in every circumstance. It's only a question of where is that power distributed and how is it used. And so Jesus, like in the upper room discourse, Jesus isn't telling the disciples that they shouldn't have power. He's saying that they should not lord their power over their folks. That's the question. Isn't, does Jesus have power? Of course Jesus has power, but Jesus led differently because he didn't lord his power over his disciples. And so often when it comes to polity problems, there's just questions of authority. Who has the power? Who has the authority to make certain decisions? And sometimes people lord their power. Committees sometimes lord their power over staff. Sometimes pastors lord their power over a board or the congregation. And so there's often questions of where does the power rest and how is that power being wielded? And those are kind of two different questions. One's a polity question and one's a character question. And both often need to be addressed. So you have a lot of variables here. We've kind of clumped them together under this category of a leadership conflict. But that would be another key reason why we end up getting calls and say, we need someone to come help us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, power and authority is not unbiblical, and it's not inherently evil or dysfunctional. In fact, Acts 1:8, Jesus told them, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. So there's a power requirement to function in a healthy way as the body of Christ and as witnesses to the world. So the question then comes down, all right, Jesus, we're humans. How are we going to relate to one another? And how are we going to distribute power and authority to best accomplish your purposes? And that's where people like us come in, to help put together healthy leadership structures and things like that. So, there you go. So the church decline, pastor changes, and leadership conflicts. These are the most common reasons that we get calls saying, "Hey guys, there's something going on. I feel like we need to work through a process." So. Scott, let's move into the solution. Maybe this will be a surprise to you, maybe it won't. There is a solution, a common solution that most often alleviates any of these things or all.
Yeah. This will not shock any longtime listener to this podcast, but all of these problems have the same solution, which is to go back to the basics, to get back to the fundamentals of what it means to be a healthy church, to go back to Scripture and see what is God asking us to do. We go back to the Great Commission. Are we a church that's making and maturing disciples? Yes or no? Or do we have competing missions that are driving our church? What is it that we value? Are we valuing things that are healthy, or are there things that we are valuing that are unhealthy and unproductive? Do we have a clear pathway for people to grow in their relationship with Jesus, or are we just doing a bunch of stuff out of habit and tradition? Where is it that we are going? That's the vision question. Do we know where we're going? Has anyone ever asked? And what are we going to get done this year? And then tied on to that would be a leadership question. Who's going to lead us forward? And do we have a structure and process for growing more leaders? If we look at those 6 issues, and it's not rocket science, it's simple. But just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. Think of it this way. The things that it takes to lose weight are simple. Just eat the right food and move your body. It's simple. It's not easy. And it's why there's such a huge industry around health, physical health, because it's okay to need help to do even a simple thing. And that's what it is that we do. We help you do the simple thing, because sometimes doing the simple thing is still really, really, really hard. That's the benefit of working with a guide. And this is not one long sales pitch, but we're a nonprofit organization. So this is our ministry. It's what we do because we love it. And we love the church, and we love your church. And so if you've experienced any of these challenges, you're experiencing decline, you're experiencing leadership conflict, you maybe have a pastor who's about to be in transition, those are great prompts or nudges for you to go, maybe let's and not every church needs help. Let me just be honest. Like, not every church needs someone to come in and help them. But if you're struggling with these things and you need help, I just feel the permission to ask for help. And it doesn't need to be us. It could be someone else. But ask for help from someone. It's okay. It's good.
Yeah.
It's healthy.
Yeah. At least take the time to evaluate. Try to figure out where exactly are we right now. What might be the issues, and what are the pain points that we're feeling? Where do we feel off? Sometimes it's not even, we get calls and it's not even necessarily very clear to them. It's almost like, you wake up in the morning, sometimes you're like, do I feel sick? Am I getting sick? This thing, I just don't feel healthy. I'm not, something's wrong. Sometimes that's the call. Like, not exactly sure what's wrong, but we don't feel healthy. So yeah. Call.
Yeah.
Hey,
okay, we do keep saying call, but I think
Yeah.
it's worth noting that we don't receive really hardly any. I don't want to say zero.
True. Yeah.
We don't get phone calls.
Call doesn't mean call anymore.
It's like not 1997. We get people fill out a contact form on our website where they send us an email at leadership@malphursgroup.com. They're not calling us up. We do have a phone number, but that's not the common way people are connecting with us.
Yeah, that's true. How about let's call an audible on the title of this episode. By the time you're listening to this, it probably will be 3 common reasons why churches contact a consultant, not call a consultant. So
That's true.
there you go. Sometimes we got to make a change on the fly. Hey, thanks for being with us this week on the Church Revitalization Podcast. This was episode 154. So you can find today's show notes at malphursgroup.com/154. We would love for you to share this content with somebody else that in ministry, because we would love to be able to help them as well and talk with them. As Scott mentioned, we're a nonprofit organization, and a portion of all of the money that comes in from churches in the United States goes right back into helping churches globally. And we are presently experiencing a very large and rapid growth around the world that we are seeking to respond to and strategically grow. So we would love to partner with your church in making that happen. If you have room for a new missions partner, we would love to be that organization that helps bring the gospel around the world by equipping church leaders to do what they've been called to do, and that's making mature disciples of Jesus. Love to have you with us on that. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next week.